Welcome one, welcome all to our After School 2022 In Review special. I am Katie Petrick, and we've got an hour and a whole lot to discuss. So for those of you watching on Facebook and YouTube, please add your 2 little cents into the comments section as we move along. But before we kick things off, let's meet our intellectual luminaries on the panel. And we're going to start with the original prop man himself, a history teacher and a lecturer for more than 107, 8, 12 years at this point, and host of One Nation, Dr. Jake Jacobs.
Shalom.
And making the trip from the sunny, glorious Florida that we know to join us up here in the blustery, wintry Wisconsin wonderland of a studio in January, as we know. He's fluent in more than 1,200 languages, and he's host of 25 different programs, including our very own Newman Report. We have Mr. Alex Newman. All right, anyway, while 2023 may be off and running, we thought it would be interesting to not only take a look back at some of the biggest stories of 2022, but make some big and bold predictions as to what we believe will take place in the coming months ahead. So, I'm going to get things started here by discussing an identifier that has become a badge of honor for those newfound heroes who have begun to take on the public schools in this country. And I'm talking about those mama bears. And here's the deal with the mama bears. It became a term that got thrown around a lot in 2022. A mama bear, as we know, will protect her young out in the wild. So now we finally, I say finally, had some mama bears go out into the public school system realm and attempt to somewhat protect their young. Now, whether or not you agree with what their approach was, you can leave it to be seen. But the main mama bear story that I wanted to focus on, because it came later in the year, and it was just interesting to kind of, finally a mom took it to the next level. It was in Iowa. It was Kimberly Reichs, who's the founder of the Iowa Mama Bears. So she really took the whole Mama Bear approach to heart.
Really is an organization called that?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, she started that organization, and she went in front of the Ankeny, if that's how you pronounce it in Iowa, Ankeny Community School District's board meeting, to criticize the show a drag show that they were having for the school assembly that the Gay Straight Alliance Club at the high school had sponsored as part of the group's end of the year meeting. And instead of just going up to the podium and saying, hey, why is this going to be in our school? She decided to take it to the next level and dress the part. So she dressed as, and originally she was in normal clothing, but then she revealed what the drag performer is going to wear. And I think opened some people's eyes, but at least it drew attention nationwide. Now, I don't know how you guys feel about what has been happening in the school boards. I know we have opinions abound, so let me get your opinion as to what happened over the whole course of this last year involving parents finally at least stepping up to the microphone.
I'm still waiting for those intellectual luminaries you said you were going to introduce. Has anybody seen them?
Are they around? Have we found them?
No, I'm glad that these moms are I guess they say in Alcoholics Anonymous, right? The first step is to recognize you have a problem.
Exactly.
So that's good. And there are different ways of dealing with problems. I think they'd probably be better off, and their children would probably be better off if they just went and banged their head against a brick wall. I don't think trying to reform cancer is really going to be helpful, but it is a good indication that parents are finally getting upset, and that's step one. After we get upset, then we can figure out how to solve it. I don't think screaming at school boards will help anything. I think taking your kids out would help, but hey, it's a start, right? Get angry. Yeah. That's a good progress.
Well, and that's, I guess, where I was very fascinated by what happened over the course of all of last year, because we report on this all the time, what's happening in education, and we look to what's happening at the public school system most of the time. And more stories than ever before have finally come out where parents step up to the microphone and at least acknowledge, like you said, that there is a problem. And so 2022, I feel like, was the year that parents opened their eyes. Now it's a matter of what comes next. And like you said, I mean, you can't just go about and be like, okay, well, there's the problem and what's going to happen. You have to actually take action. And as we all advocate for, the best course is to get those kids out of there, not just go up and yell at these, 10, 12 members of a school board who maybe aren't even paying attention, have no idea who you are or your kids, or frankly care about your kids.
Right.
And certainly not as much as you do, like a mama bear should.
So wait a minute now. So are you guys saying that en masse, let's get our kids out of government schools?
I'm saying that for sure.
For sure. Okay. And I know
Absolutely.
we've talked about this in previous programs where, look, I started in a public school. First time I ever stepped in a public school was 1977.
And
so
look what happened.
Look what we
I've
have
covered
here.
like, what, 6 decades of my life in the public school. Eventually I left when I defended Governor Walker, then did the private school. And sadly, I thought the private school, for me, would be the answer to the problem. And the fact is that wokeism, leftism, whatever we call it nowadays, is profoundly creeping in even to private institutions. This was a particular Catholic institution. But with that being said, and I'm not disagreeing with you guys, I still love the fact that the silver lining in that black cloud of the Wuhan virus was that parents began to see what was going on in the public government schools, and they were appalled with it. And therefore, there's been a lot of activism across the country, from Loudoun County all the way to Maricopa County, all the way up to Wisconsin, where we're seeing a lot more parents engaged. But maybe it's too little, too late. I don't know.
Well, and that's what it seems to be, is the too little too late, because this is not just Wuhan virus, COVID-19, however you want to say it, the lost year that was 2020. When that happened and parents were like, oh, wow, this is actually happening in my schools, and I'm actually seeing it for myself now, that was decades and decades in the making. And that was just like, I don't know, the straw that broke the camel's back, what kind of analogy thing you want to put in there. But I think if we're going to have true change, it's got to come in mass exodus.
Yeah.
It's got to come in mass exodus for something to happen, like to truly impact it. Because like even as we saw with mama bears and I don't know what would we call the dads, papa bears? The papa bears
Yogi.
are, yeah.
Hey, Yogi.
Hey, Yogi. If you had the parents going to the school board 99.9% of the time that we reported on, and a mother went in front of a school board. Crickets, crickets. Nothing else happened. It was, they made the spectacle.
Got visited by the FBI.
Yeah, that too. But then nothing came from it. The school board didn't actually acknowledge it, because the thing is, when these parents went in front of these school boards, it was always during public comment. And it is true, based on what the protocol is, the school board cannot comment back to the person about the public comment. So it was just, the school board heard their complaint, move on. And so nothing ever happened. And so that's where the parents opened their eyes. They took the action to make it known for any of those people in the district or even nationwide who didn't know this was happening in their kid's school. But now they have to take the real action of pulling the kids out.
Yeah.
Because I also see, like, I don't know where else we can go but having a mass exodus.
I guess maybe because things have changed so much. I can remember in the district I was in was reasonably conservative, and therefore for a while I was able to accomplish a lot of great things as far as teaching about the Judeo-Christian foundation of the nation, classic republicanism or liberalism, whatever you want to call it, from the limited government perspective of the founding fathers. Eventually, though, I began to take a lot of guff from the administration, because as they became more woke throughout the 80s and 90s, it got more difficult for me. But I guess a part of me, when we talk about en masse, I'm thinking of possibly the mothers, the fathers that are out there listening, and it's like right now they're within the public school system. And we don't know the specificity within every single school board, and that you're probably right, Alex, in that maybe it's 98% of them are just, it's too late. But for the few that may be out there and they're making a difference, I want to just give them some encouragement. I know personally, even here in this area, through other shows that I do, I've been able to influence a few people to run for school board, and they're making a difference. They're exposing the 1619 Project. They're exposing a critical race theory, or what I call the critical racist theory.
But
So,
one of the big
yeah.
problems, I think, is that the school boards don't even control the schools anymore. I mean, I think the real issue is that why do we have government educating our children in the first first place. That I think is where we went wrong. But we live in a world today where there's this illusion that the school board actually determines what happens in the school, and that's completely false. They rubber stamp the budget, they rubber stamp the salary demands that the teachers union and the local superintendent come up with. But beyond that, they really don't serve a function anymore. What's happening in the classroom now is decided by the U.S. Department of Education, which transfers its demands down to the state departments of education, the publishing houses, the teachers unions. It's like this multi-tentacled monster that is devouring children, and we're looking at this like one little tentacle of the school board saying like, well, if you scream at them enough, or if we get three, and I've seen it happen over and over again. I've helped people get elected to school board. I've worked with state and local school board members across the country. They get in, they fly them to state capitol for orientation and tell them, look, you have an important job. You have to decide whether the kids are going to wear uniforms. And by the way, you have to rubber stamp the salary demands. It's like,
yep.
What good does it do to have a conservative majority on the school board? The kids are still going to learn the same dumb stuff. They're still going to read the same dumb textbooks. They're still going to be told they came from slime, that there is no God, et cetera, et cetera. And occasionally you'll get a great teacher who will slip in some truth in defiance of the court rulings and the state statutes and all the rest of it. But I don't know, maybe I'm just too pessimistic, but I think the catastrophic mistake we made was saying, hey, why don't we let the government educate our kids? What does the government do properly? Can anybody think of anything they do properly?
Listening to Alex, you're so persuasive. You're absolutely right. Everything you just said, I absolutely agree with. I don't know, maybe because I've been within that system, if there's anything we can do to work with those who are there, but the ultimate answer is to end mass exodus.
Well, and to back Alex's point, and then to help, I'm going to bridge the gap with optimism.
The great unifier.
I'm an optimistic realist here. When I was a journalist, I would see it. I would go to the school boards, and I was the only person in the audience, in the entire audience. And the school board, it wasn't like, all right, here's our agenda, let's get to it. I've been researching all this for weeks now, and I have opinions. It's turn to the superintendent. Mm-hmm. What should we do? Turn to the principal. What should we do?
True.
Like,
so
they
true.
don't, and the thing is, these are small town districts. At the big, it's almost worse, actually, at the big districts, obviously. Because the thing is, that at the bigger districts, the cities districts, that being on the school board is just a stepping stone. That's that first step to getting into political office, and you are down in the pipeline. You're on your way to Washington. And as we saw in Loudoun County or Fairfax County, either way, right next to Washington, D.C., they got on the school board. They didn't have kids. They don't care about kids. They just use that as a stepping stone for politics. But at the small districts, these people are farmers. Yep. They're factory workers. Yep. They don't, and a lot. I've talked to them, and they're like, "Well, I don't know much about anything, but I'm here because my kid's in the school, or my grandkids, or I want to support the district. I'm a servant, but I don't know how to serve in this capacity, so I'm going to rely on those administrators."
So you just said the word administrators. We talk about the administrative bureaucratic state, created by the progressives. It is really, so what you're saying is the government school is a micro example of what's happening in Washington, D.C.
Mm-hmm. It is.
Therefore, get out of Dodge.
Yeah. Well, and there's so many issues that, first, I always like to look at things from a biblical perspective. If you read what the Bible has to say about education, discipling, raising the next generation, there is nowhere you'll find any hint of delegation of that responsibility to the government. That's not Caesar's job. Caesar's job is to punish evil. It's always, every time it's mentioned, it's the responsibility of parents. And the church maybe can play a supplemental role, neighbors, extended family, etc. Secondly, it's just, when you live under a government that literally slaughters babies with taxpayer money, that tries to redefine marriage with the force of government, that lies to us to inject us with things and start illegal wars and all the rest of it, how could you? You wouldn't trust these people to clean the toilet at your house, let alone with the minds of your children. And yet that's what we're dealing with. And you have a system where the teachers' unions are basically getting their hand-picked puppets elected. It's such a disaster in every way that I don't think it's something that can be reformed. It's just we have to recognize that the problem is systemic. And then when people do try to say something, like we just had this story recently in I think it was New Jersey. A mom who was on the school board took her 7-year-old daughter to some elementary thing at school. She sees these poster boards telling the kids like, "Oh, you could be trans quadruple gender or whatever. She posts on Facebook, like, I'm not sure this is appropriate for our 7-year-olds. And so the military gets involved. The police chief gets involved. I mean, this is just so bonkers. I don't understand how people can accept this.
Well, it's true. But here's where I need to bridge the gap between you two, because with everything Alex says, yes, I agree. But to give hope and something to those parents who are sitting at home right now saying, it's not this end or this end. It's not get the kids out or just let them to suffer and die, basically, at least morally, in the school system. You still have to parent every morning and every night.
Yeah, yes.
Talk to them. Not, what did you do at school? No. Give me exactly what happened today during math class. What would specifically get to the details? And the thing is, that all begins when they're little. You need to build that relationship with our children. And as a mother of 2 littles, and Alex has a bunch of boys, and you're a father too. Building on that relationship to get that trust. That's the parenting that can help if you have to have your kids still remain in those public schools, is building that relationship with them so they can come home and tell you the truth of what is going on.
When I was in the public system and I saw the attitude of the union, which I fought from day one, because I lived in Arizona, worked a right state, came to Wisconsin in the 80s, and all of a sudden came to the reality that the unions were corrupt and controlled education in this state. That was when I was raising my children. And so they were homeschooled in Christian school, and then eventually my son persuaded me to let him go into the public schools. It was the biggest mistake I made. I'm seeing it now, because I was hoping that maybe having parents who understood that, we could counter what was going on. Unfortunately, it didn't work so well. So my kids are in their 30s now, so it's a different situation. And we're talking, think of it, guys, 40 years ago to see what's. That's why I'm to quote the Monkees, I'm a believer, Alex. I mean, this really, he's absolutely spot on. I just got that part of me that wishes there's some way we could. It's too late, though. It is too late. I agree.
And I think part of that, what you're saying, is where we are currently, is there is still that part of people, the time in history that we're at right now, is they are still believing in that hope and that almost like that holding on. I'm not trying to say let go, but let it go, let it go.
Well, you think we would know better if you study Horace Mann, John Dewey, the progressives and their view, which is very anti-Christian, et cetera, et cetera. You think I would know better, or you do know better.
Yeah, you said if and you'd think. And those are two things.
All right.
Well, but to your point,
we don't think.
I wanted to mention that too. If you look at the history of this thing that we call the public school system, the people who created it were actually pretty open about their agenda. You've got, even before Horace Mann came along and actually created it, the guy who first came up with the idea, Robert Owen, was a socialist in Indiana. Started this new
one of the early communists.
That's right. Even before Karl Marx, the guy was a Marxist,
Yeah.
and he wanted to smash the family and get rid of private property. And he thought the reason his stupid commune failed was because the government wasn't brainwashing children. So he sets up this crazy organization dedicated to having the government take over education. Horace Mann re-imports it from Prussia. John Dewey takes it and weaponizes it even further. There's this, I think, mythology that there was this golden age of public school. You hear a lot of the older generation. Well, when I was a kid, we still prayed in school. And okay, so you had one prayer, and then you had 35 hours of Marxist propaganda.
Was that a dig on my generation or my dad's generation?
I was talking about my parents.
Okay.
Because my parents' generation, they still prayed in school. They still had a Bible verse here and there. Even after the Supreme Court struck those things down, a lot of schools kept doing it. Who cares what the clowns on the Supreme Court think? But the purpose of this system, and that's what people don't realize, the purpose of the system was always to fundamentally transform the country. It's not that it was hijacked by evil liberals at some undetermined point in the past. It was built for this purpose.
It was actually very transparent, open agenda from the get-go.
Yeah, go read John Dewey's writings. The guy was a flaming communist who wanted to turn your kids away from God, and he said so.
Right. So that's reinforced by the Frankfurt School, which in essence gets into the universities, who are now the new teachers of the future, teachers of America, and it goes all the way down into kindergarten.
It's a bing, bang, boom system. That's what we have. I will say, I with that mythology of it all, I still go back in my small town. We have a one-room schoolhouse that got moved over into the park, and you can go in there and it just feels like, oh, this is amazing.
Little House on the Prairie.
Yeah, right, that's so cute.
I'm like, oh, they even have like the 10 Commandments written there. Oh, that's amazing. And you just look at it and you're like, this is what I played at school when I was a little kid, and maybe I want that. So part of me is still even though I went to the public school, and even though I'm part of the generation that is like now ruining it even more, I have the mythology of like, maybe we can hold on just a little bit and it'll be good.
Look, if you would go back into my public school, high school days, I had a file. I was in the principal's office more than a lot of the kids were. The kids would laugh. Dr. Jacobs, could you come to the office? And they'd be like, here he goes again. And you know why it was 9 times out of 10? It was because of me sharing classic republicanism or classic the Judeo-Christian roots. I'm serious.
Yeah.
Were you talking to the kids about the Judeo-Christian roots of the founder of the country? And I would say, yeah. And I would say I took them to the Library of Congress and showed them Thanksgiving proclamations passed by our first Congress and our first president, or that Christianity was supposed to be used in the schools in the Northwest Ordinance.
Yeah.
And Dr. Jacobs, you have to be careful when you talk about those things, because that sounds like preaching. It's like,
I've talked to teachers from the government brainwash system where they say they can't even read the parts of the Declaration of Independence because we hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, that they're endowed by their creator. You can't say that.
Or
separation of church and state.
Even natural law
The
is
laws of
reflected
nature
in
and
the first
nature's
paragraph.
God.
The last paragraph calls our creator supreme judge of the world.
Yeah. Can't say that. No.
No.
Separation of church and state. The Supreme Court justice on the court, Justice Potter Stewart, in those early 60s rulings, in his dissent, he said, this is not establishing neutrality with respect to religion. What you people are doing, he said, his fellow court members, is establishing the religion of secularism.
Yep.
And it's actually the religion that John Dewey would have called humanism. He was one of the architects of the Humanist Manifesto, which they acknowledged, by the way, was a religious document. It takes an unbelievable amount of faith to believe that first tenet of their false religion, that the universe is self-existing and not created. And yet the Supreme Court, under the guise of enforcing the First Amendment, which says Congress shall make no law, not the state of New York or your local school district, they actually established this false religion from the pit of hell that holds that we can be our own little gods, right? Ye shall be as gods, because there is no real God, so we'll determine for ourselves what's right or wrong. It's an atrocity perpetrated against the American people, perpetrated against our children.
Not a coincidence that many of these individuals you talk about were signers of the Humanist Manifesto 1 and Humanist Manifesto 2.
That's right. Read them, folks.
Yeah,
Read the documents.
When I first heard this stuff, I'm like, here it goes, conspiracy. And sure enough, I looked it up, and it's like, oh my God, these are Julius Huxley, many of the great philosophical thinkers.
The first head of UNESCO.
Yeah.
Yep.
Exactly.
Wow.
So that's the UN Education Agency, and all this stuff's out in the open, right? It doesn't even meet the definition of conspiracy. Conspiracy, by definition, requires secrecy. These people would shout from the rooftops that they want to brainwash your kids into being good little collectivists.
But remember, if we would mention this, we're called the conspiracy nuts. If you bring up anything about the Great Reset with the World Economic Forum, and they say in no uncertain terms they're out to destroy America, they're out to destroy free enterprise, right?
Yep.
And you're called the conspiracy nut, and I'm just saying, go back to their website, listen to their speeches.
And then open a dictionary and look up the word conspiracy and find out what it really means, you fool. Stop parroting CNN talking points, right?
Boy, Katie, you got us going.
I'm going to have to get some tinfoil out and put it on their head, and then we'll take care of that. But before we move on to that, I guess, I want to take just one hot second to point out this supreme beverage vessel
That is not the supreme beverage
that you see
vessel.
before you. Oh, look at that, a little healthy republic. Now, these boys have their own as well, and darn it, you should too.
One nation.
My Newman Report one is back in my office at home in Florida.
Lost away in Florida. Now, to get your own, all you have to do is simply visit our new media swag store, as I'm calling it, at the FreedomProject.com/store. FreedomProject.com/store, and get your hands on some t-shirts, some sweatshirts, and again, these sweet, sweet mugs that include my favorite of all beverages.
Katie,
I'm not telling you what that beverage is. Anyway.
Can I get a plug in before you move on to Alex? Real quick.
Fine.
Trust me. It's worth it. It's worth it. And because I have such respect for Alex, seriously. I have watched Alex's podcast. It's called Fight Diabolical Great Reset with the Great Commission. Alex gave this in Milwaukee, Wisconsin, with VCY America. It was in November 10th of 2022. I've watched it 3 times. Audience, trust me, it's a must listen to. Alex brings in an encyclopedia of information from the UN, the EU, the United Nations, and I think your website is libertysentinel.org.
Yes, sir.
Trust me, people. Now, I want you to go to jakejacobshow.com
You should
or
definitely
my
go there.
show, One Nation Here. But trust me, check out libertysentinel.org.
Well, I appreciate that.
All
Thank
of
you.
these self-plugs. Okay,
Thanks
well,
for the
they're
money
gonna,
for that, Alex.
Yeah,
what they're
I'll
gonna
pay you
do
later.
First, though, is go to freedomproject.com/store and get their mugs, and
Yes.
then they can watch Alex as he delivers the truth. All right, well, we're going to move on, though, from parents trying to change public schools to millions more simply choosing to leave the government system altogether. Alex is going to talk to us about this mass exodus from the public schools that we've been facing here. What's going on?
I think it's one of the most exciting things happening in the country right now, and that is that millions of children are being pulled out of the government's indoctrination centers or obedience training centers, whatever you want to call them, and they're fleeing by the millions, and I think that's going to accelerate. It was actually all part of our secret plan. True story, years ago, we had a secret meeting in Florida, and we thought, all right, we're going to get millions of kids out of government schools, like Pinky on the brain, and then the next part of our plan is the fake media is going to start attacking us.
Yes.
And then the next part of our plan is all the Americans reading the fake media who know that the fake media does nothing but lie are going to say, oh my goodness, we need to get our kids out of public schools too. And pretty soon there will be no victims left in the brainwash camps. So no, in all seriousness, I'm so excited about this. The fake media has finally started catching on. They've been attacking us, which thank you, please continue. The New York Slimes, Washington Compost. Washington Compost has attacked me several times just in the last few months. And I say, please keep it up, please.
Come on, become enemy number 1.
Right.
Come
Okay.
on,
The
keep
Washington
working.
Compost.
Work harder.
What a joke. But no, they're starting to report now on the fact that millions of kids are leaving the schools. The public school system is absolutely freaking out. In Denver, I just read they're going to have to sell like 10 of their facilities, their real estate, because
Their
they don't
football
have.
fields?
Yeah, and the public school buildings themselves, they don't have any victims left to put in there. They're saying, oh, it's because people aren't having kids anymore. No, it's because people are tired of you brainwashing their precious youngsters. So I think this is one of the brightest news stories, not just of 2022, but maybe of the last decade, is that parents are finally realizing that screaming at the school board isn't going to do it. You got to withdraw and do something different.
And I do say, like, it is refreshing to think, and when I talk to my fellow parents, it's not just, well, of course my kid's going down the street to the public school when he turns 5 or 4 or 3 or out of the womb as they're trying to get him. I've made that argument for several years now, and it's actually coming true. They're down to pre-3K, and I swear to you, next year it'll be pre-2K because they want those bodies in those seats.
What did Lenin say? Give me the child for 4 years. They're mine for the rest of their lives.
And so the fact that the parents are like, well, number one, they are at least looking to the private schools, and I know, obviously, we know there's plenty of issues, but they're at least starting to open up, there's a lot of homeschools, and they have co-ops now. I'm not alone.
Yeah.
And that's,
Right.
I think, especially my generation is, our generation, since you're in house, I can say our generation, a lot of people, like, we want that community because we've lost it with all of the social media. So we would feel even more isolated if we had to homeschool on our own, but they have co-ops and there's so many resources, and you can use the internet for some good to find connections with these people, these co-ops, and so that you have support to homeschool your children as God intended. So hopefully, I'm optimistic as well.
So I don't mean to put you guys on the
kids are
spot, but what are the numbers? Like, for example, and I should know this, I'm sorry I don't exactly, or close. How many, 330 million Americans, how many kids are in government schools versus, do you know the number that is going into homeschooling or private schooling? Or
there's no
online?
central repository for this, but I've studied it in some pretty serious depth. It estimated that there are about 60 million victims in the government brainwash camps. And depending on whose numbers you look at and what state you're looking at, there's big variations in states. A lot of states don't even track this. So there are plenty of states where
You
homeschoolers...
mean there's a difference between Florida and California?
Right, imagine that, right? Massachusetts and Oklahoma, right? But there are a lot of states where there's no data at all because the state doesn't require anyone to register. You don't have to tell the government that you're going to educate your own children. It's like, well, of course, right? And so the best estimates that I've seen is that we have about 60 million kids in the government's brainwash camps. Then during the pandemic, we got some of the first official data on homeschooling. The Census Bureau released some. They said that the homeschool population during COVID, or in the year after the COVID first started, went from about 6% of school-age children to about 12%.
That's significant.
Incredible. The state of Florida was 20%. Alaska was, I think, more than a third of children were being homeschooled. I mean, even in like Massachusetts, I think it went up to maybe 10 or 12%, if I'm not mistaken. And then you have a lot of people, too, who are fleeing to the private schools. Now, your point is well taken. A lot of the private schools are super woke, and I think part of the problem is they think that they need to replicate what's happening in the government brainwash camps. And some of them think, hey, we'll just save money by using the old government school textbooks. Like, no! What are you doing, you idiots?
Don't do that.
Right? And like half the Catholic diocese decided to start using Common Core. What could they have been thinking?
Look, when I was actually at a Catholic academy for 9 years after the public school experience, and they would hire an administrator from the Neenah Public School District who would bring in all his administrative woke curricula, and I would say to them, are you kidding me? This stuff is anti-Catholic. So we even had a special emergency racist training, and they were recommending using Ibram Kendi's work.
Oh my goodness, anti-racist baby.
I'm saying, do you guys do not recognize and understand that the Catholic Church has been anti-communist, anti-wokeism, you know, since the inception of the Catholic Church? What's going on here? And you would have thought somebody threw a stink bomb into the faculty meeting.
Well, and on the note of you bringing that up, when you bring race into this, during the whole pandemic and getting the data finally, this is when the teachers unions and everyone woke up, if you will, and they're like, oh, it's not all those rich hoity-toity white kids who are just leaving, it's minorities are leaving too.
Because
the
data on black families was incredible. It went from like 3% of school-age black children were being homeschooled to like 16%. And the liberals started losing their minds.
That's because, wait, no, they're ours.
Right, they belong to us. Don't let them leave the plantation. Quick, offer them free laptops. Like, what? They actually are offering free laptops. We got a note from postcards from my school district where I stay in Florida. Like, if you sign up for a government school, we'll give you a free laptop.
Wait,
garbage.
Dell, Apple, what brand?
I didn't even ask. I probably should have. Right? I got 5 of them. We'll enroll 2, get a couple laptops, see what happens. Right? It's disgusting.
All right, let's do this.
And they hate competition, don't they?
Oh my goodness! But all over the country right now, they are having emergency meetings about, folks, what do we do? Too many kids are leaving. There are school districts that have started sending out government bureaucrats to family homes. Like, hey, is there anything we could do to get you to send these children back into our custody or care? Like, nope. Boom. Right? And they were like threatening people.
Have you listened to Randy Weigengartner on this stuff? She is going apoplectic.
Oh, the
American Federation of Teachers.
Don't speak ill about my Randy Weingarten.
You know what I loved so much, and it goes right with this. She posted on Twitter, I think, if I remember correctly, it was a few months ago. She's like, oh my goodness, Ron DeSantis and conservatives aren't trying to reform the public school anymore. They're trying to destroy it. Oh, I wish it were true.
Her tweets are some of the best. I think if they wanted to, this panic in their emergency mode, all they need to do is be like, all right, everyone off of social media. Because what the teachers put out there, they put it out there for all to see. It's like, just stop.
She makes almost $600,000 a year.
Yes.
Well, she's special.
And she flies over to Ukraine to save the Ukrainians.
And, hey, she has the flag in her Twitter account. She's serious.
Talk about
acknowledge
virtue.
her. She is serious with her Ukraine support. It's fine. Well, anyway, since parents across the country are deciding to leave the government schools, I say we do the same and head on down to the southern border, where illegal border crossings, they're just reaching historic levels over and over and over. And this is as the one and only Senator Charles Chucky Chuck Schumer recently said the quiet part out loud. This was back in November. Just take a look at this.
Now more than ever, we're short of workers. We have a population that is not reproducing it on its own with the same level that it used to. The only way we're going to have a great future in America is if we welcome and embrace immigrants, the dreamers, and all of them, because our ultimate goal is to help the dreamers, but get a path to citizenship for all 11 million or however many undocumented there are here.
Yeah.
Unreal.
He looks like a librarian right there. I can't get over the glass every time Chuck Schumer's on screen. But anyway, Jake, Tell us a little bit about
You
the
know,
southern border.
during the campaign, there's Joe Biden, literally during the Democratic presidential debates, begging the illegal immigrants to swarm over the border, right? Literally swarm. Now, I lived in Arizona for 10 years, lived there back in the 70s, went to Arizona State. It was bad then. And then I can still remember coming into the 80s when President Reagan had the amnesty bill that was passed, in essence, to give him amnesty. And as many of you know, I love Reagan. I teach on his life. I teach at the Reagan Ranch, etc. But I wrote him, and I called my congressman and said, he's making a major mistake. You're going to feed the monster. And now fast forward, I get tired of all the lefties, the media, saying there's not a problem at the border. So I went to the border last February. I'll be going there again this March. And I mean, I'm not just going in a photo op cleaning up El Paso like Biden just did a couple days ago, but I'm going there in camouflage with the proper stuff to protect me, hiding our car underneath the brush, our Jeep, seeing the cartel, seeing what the cartel is doing as far as the Chinese-based fentanyl, as far as the sex trafficking going on, talking to Sheriff Mark Lamb out of Pinal County, who says to me, Jake, that corridor that's in between Maricopa County, you got Pima County, Tucson area, and if they get into that corridor, once they get up to the Highway 8 up in that area, they're into the rest of the country. And those drugs come into Green Bay, they go up to Buffalo, and here we do have the Customs and Border Protection saying we just broke a record. And the fact of the matter is that's not even including the getaways.
Yeah.
And so the point is, if we keep up at this rate, we're dealing with, probably by the time done, old Brighton Sleepy Joe is done, we're talking 10 million illegal aliens, and I stress the legal term that's been used since the founding of the country, illegal aliens in this country. And sadly, along with that comes the crime, comes the drugs, comes this automatic assumption that somehow we owe them, and it also comes an injustice done to those foreigners who come to this country legally and properly and get in line. It does a profound disservice.
Well, yeah, I mean, as we know, it takes one bad apple to ruin the bunch. And so we do know that people who are crossing the border have good intentions, want to become U.S. citizens. There are plenty of people who do that both legally, and then there are those who do it illegally. But the issue is not, we can't just be like, well, we feel bad for them, so everyone gets to come in, because now we are in the mess that we are in. And as we've learned at the end of December, we have enough fentanyl in this country right now to kill every one of us. It was at 390 million, I want to say, doses of lethal fentanyl. Yep. And that's coming not from me or you, it's coming from the actual DEA head. Like, we're learning this information, and by opening the borders and saying whoever wants to come in, that means whoever comes in, and it's the cartels who are running the show around here.
And that's the sad part. And so Biden goes down, because this is all photo ops, it's all theater. He's running for president again, God forbid, but he is. And he wants that picture sitting by that wall. The wall that supposedly we were the ones guilty of stopping.
Racist wall.
And he just went to Mexico City, what was it, yesterday or last night? I don't know the exact time. And the socialist president of Mexico, El Presidente, he says, hey, thanks, because during your administration, not 1 meter was built, Joe. And Joe's like, oops, you kind of let the truth out here. But the fact of the matter is, when I went down there talking to the Border Patrol, they all weren't open, but some actually said it has been hell. Since Joe Biden has taken over, they've demoralized the Border Patrol. The powers that we had before have been stripped from us. You could tell a lot of them miss Donald Trump. And I'm telling you what, and when people say to me, and I talk to a lot of people in grocery stores, at my bank, and all talking about the border, and they have this view, it's just about little innocent children who are coming over the country, into the country illegally. But when you go down to the border and you see where the cartel, when they saw us and we spotted them, and you can see where they're directing people, there are huge miles-long gaps that were stopped the moment Biden came into office, and they're literally flooding into this country.
Yeah.
And you know, Ann Coulter, one more thing. When Ann Coulter wrote the book Adios America, she warned the country 7 years ago when the book came out, and everything she had to say in that book is coming true today.
Yeah. Yeah, I was actually down at the border about a year ago. I had the opportunity to spend some time. I interviewed them publicly. Trump's head of Customs and Border Protection, Mark Morgan. I talked with Tom Homan, the former head of ICE during multiple administrations. I talked to Border Patrol agents who said, look, they're coming in here. Biden administration people are putting them on airplanes. They're putting them on buses. They're shipping them primarily to red states. And once they legalize them, they're all going to be voting Democrat. And I grew up in Mexico. I actually spent more time living in Mexico than any other country in the world, in Mexico City. And I got Mexican teachers, taught me history. And so I know what they're teaching these Mexicans. They're teaching them that evil American gringos murdered their niños héroes, that America is rich because it's a capitalist, exploitative state that's raping and pillaging countries like Mexico. It's absolutely grotesque what's happening here. And I've seen the future because I've spent many years living in Europe, France, Switzerland, Sweden, Spain. And there are numerous major European cities now where the natives are actually in the minority. In London, Brits are in the minority. In Frankfurt, Germans are in the minority. In Malmo, Swedes are in the minority. In Brussels, Belgians are actually a small minority now. And what they're doing here is actually very strategic. This is not about humanitarianism, right? I was living in Sweden during the massive migrant crisis there, where just everybody from Syria and every other Middle Eastern country claiming to be from Syria showed up. And first the government tried to make this look humanitarian. They said, oh, we're just so humanitarian, we just like these people so much, we don't want them to have a bad time in Syria, so they can come. And then the numbers came out. You could have supported 50 times more refugees with Swedish taxpayer money in Lebanon or Saudi Arabia or Jordan or any other place than you could bringing them to Sweden. So this was not about humanitarianism. You could support 50 times more for the same money. Then they switched gears. They said, well, it's because we don't have enough workers. Swedish people didn't have babies, and so now we don't have anyone to care for all these old people. We need people to pay taxes, and so we can't fund the welfare system without them. Well, a friend of mine happens to be an immigrant from Iran. He's got a PhD from, I forget if it was at Columbia or Harvard or whatever. He's doing postdoctoral work at the University of Chicago. He crunched the numbers. He said there is no point in the indefinite future at which we can say these migrants are going to start contributing positively to the Treasury. So it's not about taking care of the welfare state. It's not about humanitarianism. What it's about, and I went to Hungary a couple of years ago, was invited to the Prime Minister's office, spent 25 minutes interviewing their Secretary of State, Zoltan Kovacs. I encourage people to go watch it. And they explain perfectly what's happening here. To bring up the word conspiracy again, he actually said there is a conspiracy, was the word the Prime Minister Viktor Orban used in Brussels, to flood the nations of Europe and all over the world with people from foreign cultures, with foreign languages, with foreign belief systems, for the purpose of undermining the concept of nations, for the purpose of undermining the concept of nation states, so that we can move first to regional government and then to global government. So there's nothing humanitarian about this. There's nothing financially sensible about this. This is part of a plan to undermine the nation-state system and move us toward this totalitarian one world order that these lunatics talk about openly. Right? The UN migration czar, he passed away a couple of years ago. I imagine he's probably rotting in hell right now. Peter Sutherland, a Goldman Sachs guy, he came out publicly. They put this on the UN website. They said that this refugee crisis is great. It means we're going to have to get rid of national sovereignty. We're going to have to get rid of borders, and we're going to have to all be one big human family, which sounds cute until you realize that's been the dream of every madman, totalitarian tyrant of the last 100 years.
This is why you've got to check out Alan's podcast. This stuff is brilliant.
Okay.
No, seriously, Victor Davis Hanson wrote the book Dying Citizen, brilliant professor of history, classic literature, classic history from Stanford University. And in essence, he says exactly what you're saying. And then he talks about the fact that civics, that American history, the good, the bad, and the ugly, is no longer being taught. Yeah. And it really is destroying what this nation, the greatness of this nation, what our constitutional federal republic is all about. Because along with this illegal immigration situation that is really in the millions and millions of people, it deals with the fact that we're watering down what it means to be an American.
Yeah, it's even worse. We're bringing these people in and then we're teaching them, and I saw this in Sweden, they take these migrants to these training classes, and then they teach them that this new country they just arrived in is oppressive, is white supremacy, is all these evil things. So you import huge, they're literally flying airplanes down to third world countries and bringing immigrants in.
But let me get this straight. We're the most evil, oppressive nation in the world, but that's the nation they're flocking
they want to come to, yeah.
From Latin America and Africa in the droves.
It's
Katie,
insane.
sorry.
The answer is duh. Duh.
Yeah.
No, I don't know what was more interesting in what Alex had to say, whether it was where he's traveled to and the languages he speaks, or the fact that 2 out of the 3 people in this room right now have been to the border, and our vice president still can't find out where it is.
Yeah, right.
How does that one work?
Or if he goes, remember, he was there. Now he can say he's there. He's got.
No,
I saw
that's the president. I'm talking about the vice president.
Oh,
the borders
excuse me.
are.
Yeah, well, I don't even know who
borders
she is.
are.
We never see her.
Her name is
She's on The
Kamala
View. That's about all
Ding
she
Anyway,
does.
Well, I'll tell you, I feel really stupid having spent thousands of dollars and numerous years bringing my wife into this country legally. We always joke, and it's only half joke. It would have been so much easier to fly into Mexico and swim across her, and then we could have applied for welfare as soon as she got here, right? Would have been no problem.
Just go back and do it.
It's crazy. We
Just go
should have,
down.
right? And I mean, how many millions of people who went through this insane process and paid thousands of dollars to do it legally, now we look like idiots. And we are idiots.
Well, hey, we can't go back, but we can look here in the future, because we've just spent some of the time now highlighting what we had for top stories, top issues, things that happened in 2022, but that's in the past. Now, we want to wrap things up by looking into our very own crystal ball, and we're going to gaze into the future and predict what we believe 2023 has in store for us. And I'm going to start it off because, in 2 words, Ron DeSantis. 2023, Ronnie. That's what I have to say.
Hear, hear.
It's interesting. I think basically the course of how our nation is going to move is going to be a lot determined by what Ron DeSantis does. Because I know you're wearing some boots over there, but Ron DeSantis has everyone else shaking in their boots. I hope you're very sturdy over there with yours. What he has done this past couple years, and especially this past year, has, as we, just like the teachers unions and all the teachers are like scared bleepity bleep, I think on the political level, Ron DeSantis has all of those people scared bleepity bleep, because he's actually able to govern. He's able actually to do the words that he says, there's action behind it. And I don't know if this is going to happen. Let's get your opinion. Are there any other governors out there who will maybe now step up to the plate and do what DeSantis has been doing in Florida? Can it happen around the nation? Or is DeSantis just going to be down there in Florida until he gets into the White House?
Quick aside is he
potentially?
wants to establish a Hillsdale type of university. I forget if it's called I forget the name of the school, but he wants to establish where he has no government ties, where it's independent from government influence, and they teach the classics. They teach Christianity.
Well, the University of Austin in Texas is already bringing itself up to do that. Neil Ferguson is a part of that whole thing. And I know DeSantis mentioned, we've reported on something where he is kind of wanting to do the same thing. So in terms of education, what Ron DeSantis specifically is doing, actually, I have a clip I'd like to show talking about how he feels what he's looking to do with education in the state of Florida.
We rank #1 in education freedom, and we rank #1 in parental involvement in education. Florida also ranks #1 in public higher education. This is a record we can all be proud of.
I love it.
Well,
I know it's not perfect, but I love it.
As a resident of Florida and getting to see what's happening down there, how does Ron DeSantis play in specifically with education in his policy, but also just being the governor and the force that everyone in the nation is kind of like looking at? How do you get that from a person who actually lives there and breathes it in?
Yeah, it's an interesting time to be talking about this. I don't know how much I can say publicly, but Governor DeSantis used to be my congressman, so we spent a lot of time in his office pestering him about votes that were less than ideal. I was actually just at his office a few weeks ago talking education policy with a few other people. And big things are going to happen on education in 2023. We're hoping that things will move in a good direction. In talking to legislators, we've got, I think, buy-in from some key people. But there are powerful forces that want to. Yeah, everybody's looking at Florida right now, right? Mm-hmm. So where Florida goes, that all the other Republican states are going to say, well, Florida did it, so we have to do it too. So the stakes are really high, and there are very powerful forces that want to open up the spigot of taxpayer money to homeschoolers and to private schools. And frankly, I think that's a dangerous and bad idea. So I think we're kind of at a fork in the road in Florida right now. We'll either go in a good direction, and instead of giving tax money to homeschoolers and more tax money to private schools, which is what some very powerful people want, we'll move in the direction of allowing taxpayers to keep more of their own money. We've already got some really interesting programs in Florida that I like, where things that would have gone to the state actually get diverted into these organizations like scholarship granting organizations. So the money never goes to the government. It doesn't come with strings attached. You can use it for Christian schools, private schools, whatever. So big battle coming in Florida. Hopefully it won't be a battle. Hopefully it'll just be smooth sailing. We'll see what happens with that. But yeah, I mean, DeSantis is huge right now. He's by far the best governor in the country. Being in Florida, I'm aware of some things that I think conservatives probably wouldn't be super thrilled about. We all saw Jeb Bush was sitting right next to him at the inauguration. That's never a good sign. But he really has been the best governor in the whole country, especially during the COVID thing, and we're just enormously grateful for his willingness to stand up to Joe Biden and stand up to the clowns at the CDC. And it's not even just on education. I mean, he's now, they've opened a grand jury investigation into the pharmaceutical companies. That's a personal issue for me with these injections. I'm so thrilled that we have an investigation going now that the state Supreme Court authorized. His state Surgeon General, Joe Latipo, is just an extraordinary human being. Have had him on a couple of my shows recently. I can't say enough good things about what's happening in Florida. But
so you're saying, what's the new saying? Make America Florida again?
Yeah, right. Make America Florida. Yep. But there are some areas I think where DeSantis is going to have to be really careful. The people who are right now trying to recruit him to run against Trump, some of them are really bad people. Rhino establishment hacks. And I don't even think they like Ron DeSantis. I think it's just like, hey, here's a guy we can use to divide the conservative movement. We'll make everybody either a Trump Republican.
He's not 80 years old. Let's just say,
right.
Put him. Yeah.
Well, and they want to divide conservatives. They want to have, well, no, I'm a Trump Republican. Well, I'm a DeSantis Republican. It's like, no, we need to be unified right now. The Marxists are trying to destroy our country, and the last thing we need right now is squabbles among ourselves. So, yeah, I'm hoping for the best, but I will say I wouldn't want to live any other place other than Florida right now.
Glad to have you here in Wisconsin.
I'm glad to be here temporarily.
Thanks for visiting us, I guess. You know what? Let's go, Alex. What are your predictions, though, other than Ron DeSantis? Anything else that you can see in that crystal ball of yours?
Well,
what else is going to happen?
My friend Patrick Wood had a really good term, the polycrisis of doom.
Well,
so it sounds very pessimistic, and it is. I think these World Economic Forum clowns, these globalists that are so determined to erode our freedoms and move in the direction of this great reset and stuff, they recognize that crises are the best way to move the ball forward. So I think they're engineering a food crisis, they're engineering a currency crisis, they're engineering an economic crisis. And that's not to say they'll succeed on all of this or that Americans will do what they want, but that's what they're working on. I know it for a fact. They've already got the solutions ready to go. So I think we can expect to see a lot of fear-mongering, a lot of real and imagined crises in 2023 that'll be used to expand government power, to take more of our money, take more of our freedoms. But I also foresee, to be on the brighter side here, I think the awakening that we're seeing is going to not just continue, but accelerate in a dramatic way. We've now reached a point where you can't keep deceiving people. They see with their own eyes what's happening. No amount of CNN lies, no amount of cover by the fake media is going to make people continue to remain blind. So I'm really encouraged by that. So,
all right, Jake, bring us home. What do you got going?
No, I just wanted to ask here. So you have concerns about what you're seeing happening around the world, and yet with that being said, you have hope. You gave us some hope. But really, is that really happening in the country? When you see how absolutely deplorable and horrible and deceitful the deep swamp is, the deep state is, when you see what's going on, the corruption within the United Nations and the World Economic Forum, when you see people's indifference to the growing corruption and tyranny of communist China, I would think in terms that, sadly, there are literally millions and millions of Americans who are playing along. The founding fathers always talked about having a constitutional republic that was, its foundation was the character of the people. And the character of the people right now, they'd elected, the Senate still stays within the Democrats. They actually elected, well, it was stolen, but it looks like a lot of them voted for Joe Biden. The point is, there's a lot of Americans who want something for nothing, literally, into the point where it really, really concerns me. I'm hoping that the new House House can get rid of those 87,000 IRS agents that are going to come after small businesses. That's my prediction. Maybe that's not a big glowing prediction, that somehow we can stop that. I think the best we can do right now is slow down this Leviathan, this machinery that is government gone wild right now. So
yeah, well, I think what's happening in the House is interesting. I think people need to understand that everything that the Republicans in the House are doing right now, for the most part, is theater. It's not going to matter until September comes around and the funding bills start. So yeah, they passed a bill defunding the IRS agents, which is cute. It'll mean nothing. Right, the Senate's not going to pass it. The Biden is not going to sign it.
He's not going to sign it.
So let's see if they'll do this again in September when we're talking about funding bills, and when they pass the funding bills that'll fund the IRS. They say none of this money may be used to fund the 87,000, and Joe Biden will cry and whine, and the fake media will say Republican terrorists are being insurrectionists. Right. They're going to shut down the government. If they hold the line, then they have a lot of gratitude and a lot of respect from me. I won't hold my breath. I will say I need. Americans need to stop looking for a political messiah. There's no politician that's going to save us. We're in a spiritual crisis, and politics is important, but it's not going to ultimately be the thing that makes or breaks this country. The politics is a reflection of who we are as a nation and where we're going.
And that reflects the character aspect that I was talking about.
Exactly. I want to piggyback off of that because I want to remind people, because I need to remind myself on a daily basis, because we are inundated by this all day, all night. What's happening nationally, what's happening even at the state level, politics, social media, news, politics. Take a breath, go outside, talk to your neighbors, and you're going to be reminded that the world doesn't have to be that scary all the time. If we get back to the grassroots, that's the home where we live, if we get back to caring for our children, educating our children, even within our own four walls, then we go outside to our neighbors, and then we interact with them, and we get in co-ops, and we become community again, we would all be better off. So if we can kind of look inward a little as we go into 2023, not completely shutting ourselves off and ignoring everything, but I know I need to take a deep breath and take some time to get out of the big bubble that is the scary national mongering, fear mongering kind of contraption, and look inward.
It ends up being really important too. During the last few years of this COVID ridiculousness, most of the country, in fact, most of the world was living in this absurd situation. They couldn't go out of their house. They had to wear 8 masks. They couldn't go into a restaurant without some stupid vaccine passport. In my neck of the woods, life was completely normal. Literally nothing about my life changed. We kept homeschooling. We kept going to church. We kept going to the beach. We kept hanging out with friends. Nothing changed. We didn't have any local mandates. We didn't have any county mandates. Ron DeSantis very, very quickly walked back the initial restrictions that he put on us at the state level, and so my life didn't change at all. And yet, I'm talking to other people in other states, even supposedly conservative states, and they're like, oh yeah, I'm not allowed to leave my house. Oh, I can't have a job anymore because I won't take the injection. Like, what kind of craziness is this? And in Florida, they actually said any company that fires you because you won't take the injection, they're going to be fined $50,000. So it makes a huge difference. You're not going to be able to change Congress. It's important for us to look at that and work on that, but really you can make a huge difference in your city, in your town, in your county, at your state level, and it makes all the difference in the world.
All right, can I just interject something quick here? I don't mean to be contrary for the sake of being contrary. And I'm agreeing with you guys. I talk at my other shows over and over again with my friends over and over again, the importance of our families, of the home, of local connection with the community, making a difference there. Well, I would think back in the 1930s, people were having maybe the same mindset, God and family, family and God. And in the meantime, the machinations of these players on the world scene, dictator Xi, his Marx-Leninism is socialism in Chinese letters as the Chinese military expands, as they're encroaching upon various parts of the world, Latin America and Central America, as we're having an immigration problem, an inflation problem. My point is, I agree with you, Katie. I agree with you. But I'm sounding like Alex Newman right now because the powers that be, they don't sleep. We get out of bed and we work hard. We proclaim the good news of Christ and the good news about this is a republic under God, et cetera, et cetera. But in the meantime, they don't give a rat's patootie about anything that we just said. They're out there. So we need to kind of Be as wise as a serpent in the midst of this and harmless as a dove. Be prepared, love our family, do the things locally in our homes, but also if we can support the Ron Johnsons, the Rand Pauls, the Jim Jordans of the world that can make a difference. Because as much as we may or may not like it, politics makes a profound difference in life.
Yep.
And
I agree with you 100%.
Beyond our
Everything you said is
pocketbooks,
so
in our
important.
classroom, in our homes. You just said earlier they want to take our gas stoves. This is a part of this bizarre world, this sixth mass extinction that's around the corner, and we pay the price.
Yeah.
So
No, you're so right, and we need to keep our eye on all those things because these psychopaths do not rest. So we gotta stay on guard.
Well, on that note, 2023. Stay on guard. All right. Well, thank you for taking some time to join us for our After School 2022 in Review special. And next month, we're going to discuss the option of broadcasting this show live so we could respond to your questions and comments right there live during the broadcast. So if you like the idea, then please respond in the comments with this. Go live. All caps if you want. Yell it at us. You can just scream it. Maybe scream it at the boys, not me. But anyway, for
Scream
Alex,
at Katie.
Scream at me. I have children. I understand it. Now for Alex, for Dr. Dig, and for all of us here at Freedom Project, thank you for watching, and we'll see you next month
Ciao.
on After School Special.